We have until 3:30, so I think we have about 25 minutes left, and we have 5 discussants. So we will try to be very efficient with the time given to us. So I would like to ask each discussant to limit their remarks to 3 or 4 minutes. And once we hear from everyone, I think we'll be able to further our discussion. So first, I would like to invite the mayor to share with us his thoughts. So we heard the presentation about Finland from Professor Heikki. Hiilamo, thank you very much for your detailed explanation. And we also heard from Professor Jürgen Schupp about the basic income pilot project in Germany. So thank you very much for your detailed presentation. If I were to summarize, if you look at for Finland, their pilot project, it doesn't seem to emphasize, or there were too much changes in terms of employment incentive. So I think that's what sort of stood out for me. And I think for safety income project in Korea, that's an important part for us. So if you have any subjective assessments or qualitative assessments, I think that's important in terms of looking at people's well-being and so forth. So, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, there are many people who are in the welfare blind spot, and in Korea, some of them have taken their own lives. We see income polarization becoming very common throughout the world, and there are people, who are taking their own lives. We have to reduce these numbers and create a new welfare system so that people's employment motivation goes up and more people can enjoy welfare benefits. And for those people who are receiving welfare benefits, we also have to make sure, that they are not offended or hurt. We have to make sure that we maintain and protect their dignity. So this is some of the goal as we introduce SSIP. For the next 3 years through the SSIP, there are objectives that we would like to realize. And I know that we need to minimize trial and error as we try to attain our goals. Currently, it's a pilot project, and we will have to improve and modify our pilot project so that we can maximize the benefits and minimize the side effects. So this is some of the expectations, so to speak, I have about SSIP. And there are many countries who have carried out pilot projects ahead of us. And our pilot project, I hope, can be analyzed with a diverse perspective and look at the strengths and weaknesses of our project. So our standard is 85% of the standard median income, and the gap between their income and the standard median income, the gap 50% is supported through SSIP. So after a year, if we can, we maybe change that 85% standard, and we're now supporting 50% of that income gap, but maybe we can actually change that to 30 to 40%. So we want to do different attempts in terms of our experiment. However, I'm sure when we try to, so I'm sure that in order to have a thorough analysis of the pilot project results, it will be hard to make so many sudden changes. So for us, I think the best option is to get the insight of many experts and apply that to our SSIP. I hope that through today's forum, we will be able to look at how we can improve the analytical tools that we can apply to SSIP. And we want to share confidently with the international community the results of SSIP. So I hope that the forum will help us to better analyze the process and results of SSIP. And we look forward to the insight and wisdom of the experts who are leading this area. And so that is why I'm come here and taking part in this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor, for giving us detailed information of SSIP, and we will be able to hear further from our mayor later on. Next, we would like to ask Michael Tubbs for his remarks.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And let me start with saying I, like the mayor, appreciate the rigor in the discussion around data and outcomes, but I want to start by taking a step back and hope that we all recognize that the current system we live in was not studied, was not tested, nor is it rooted in evidence. It's more rooted in bias, and it's produced the terrible outcomes we complain about. So I want to start by saying we can't let perfect be the enemy of better, because we know in America, in Germany, in Finland, in South Korea, there are people just like me and you who lack basic levels of dignity because they have to live with the inhumane conditions of poverty. I think it's interesting that no matter where you are in the world, in the United States, probably the prime example, that there's people that the current systems leave people out who need help, make it hard, at least in America, to get help because once you get better, you lose the help you had, so you take 2 steps back. And I think the work we're doing to build something better is incredibly inspiring and important. And I'm glad we're doing this together globally. But let's start with that the status is not working, and we have a responsibility to make it better. And we can't spend 50 years testing and trying and piloting. At some point, we have to launch and iterate and build as we go. Because again, this current system was not tested, was not analyzed, and is not producing the outcomes we deserve or want to see. So in Stockton, we initiated a guaranteed income program that's now been emulated by 100 cities in the United States, including the big cities you hear about, like Los Angeles and Chicago, as mentioned in the video. And because America lacks many of the basic social safety net inputs you all have, the results we've seen have been different. So in Stockton, we gave 125 people $500 a month. And what we saw was that actually, because there aren't robust social safety nets and there aren't robust supports for housing and childcare, et cetera, in the States, we actually saw employment increase. We saw that those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely to be 2 times less likely, to be unemployed than those who did not receive the guaranteed income. And we also saw that those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely to go from part-time to full-time employment than those who did not receive the guaranteed income. And I think what's consistent across pilots is that we see no labor market impacts. So I think we can all put to rest the lie that allowing people to have a baseline level of economic security does not does not make people stop working. That people aren't inherently lazy. In fact, the vast majority of people who can work do work. And if folks aren't working, it's because there's usually some barriers or some mental health issues or a disability, or they're doing work inside the home, like child rearing, taking care of elderly parents, which is also still work. And as the video mentioned to start this, the fact that the 4th industrial revolution is coming, the fact that now everyone across the world is playing with the AI generator to make beautiful portraits of themselves illustrate that we also have to expand our definition of work and realize that what we're talking about is about regardless of what people do, because jobs will be different 20 years from now in caregiving, in art, and being a student, etc. And we'll have to be considered more like jobs, and the guaranteed income is a way to help solve for that reality. I would also say, in terms of, we heard discussion about some of the non-work impacts, what we saw was that those who received the guaranteed income actually became healthier. That so much of the stress and the anxiety, at least that we see in the United States, is oftentimes caused by very pernicious economic insecurity, very grappling and stifling poverty. And that when people had enough money to just pay a bill, to just make sure the roof was on their head, to just buy food, they were less stressed, less anxious, happier, and spent more time with their children. There's one gentleman in particular, Tomas, who talks about how the guaranteed income allowed him to be a better parent because he was actually able to get a better job so he didn't have to work two jobs. So yes, in the data, it would say he worked less, although I think we would all agree having one job that pays the bills is better than having two jobs that doesn't pay the bill. And in doing so, he was able to show up for his kids and realize what they like. He says, now I've realized my kids like science because I'm home and I see them. And now I have income to buy them telescopes, to take them on field trips, etc. And in the States, we see sort of more momentum around this idea. I mentioned we have 100 cities testing and piloting now. And my state of California, under Governor Newsom, became the first state to initiate a guaranteed income program focused on pregnant people and foster youth. And the announcement just went out last week, and the cash will be dispersed shortly. So I'll conclude with saying, I think beyond the importance of data, and I think I mentioned this in my opening remarks, part of the conversation we're having is a conversation of values. It's a conversation of what type of world do we want to live in. And I truly believe 100 years from now, people will look back and say, oh my gosh, it took them so long to recognize that no one should be poor, that no one should be hungry, that our societies are healthier, are safer, are more cohesive, that people are able to maximize their full potential when they have their basic needs met. So I want to thank everyone for their courage and their radical imagination, because I truly think we are building to where we need to be. And that's a society and a global community that understands that no one needs to earn their humanity. No one needs to earn not being hungry. No one needs to earn a baseline level of shelter over their heads, because everyone is human. So when we talk about universal basic income, we're really talking about moving our societies to an understanding of this notion of universal basic human dignity. So thank you.
Okay, 감사합니다.
So thank you very much. I know that many of you are joining us virtually online. We're going to now invite Professor Kim Wonsub from Hong Kong University.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to be with you in person, but 2 days ago I contracted COVID, and so I could not attend in person. So in 2020, when COVID-19 began, I ended my 15 years of living in the U.S. And then I went to Hong Kong, and then I received a letter from Joe Biden, and it was the first time to receive a letter from the president. And in the letter, it stated that due to the pandemic, my life might deteriorate, and therefore thousands of dollars have been sent to me. So this was the economic impact payment. So the IRS understood my income and knew my bank account that I used in Hong Kong. And so during the pandemic period, my income did not go down. So I did not need this subsidy. However, it led me to realize the importance of such Social Security policies that find people in need. And so the government is trying to identify the socially neglected, and just using the system as is trying to find a needle in a haystack. So even before one realizes that you need help, there has to be policies that go to these people before they realize that they need help. Or else we will keep on finding blind spots in our social safety net. And the reason why this situation is occurring in Korea is because there's this strict eligibility standard, and also if you purchase a car amounting to $2,000 to get to the hospital, then you lose your eligibility. And even if you have a very poor small house, still you lose your eligibility, and therefore 730,000 people are losing their eligibility though they have low income. And so these people who are struggling, they have to prepare all of the paperwork, and all of this bureaucracy is really difficult for them, and also this leads to a lot of cost associated to the services. And if you work, then this becomes a disadvantage because if you work, then you lose your eligibility, and you have to prove that you are poor, and this becomes a mental burden too. So as an alternative social security system is the NIT, negative income tax, and UBI, and it reduces dramatically the various eligibility standards and selection process, and it does not have disincentives for work. And SSIP is a adjusted NIT. If the income per person is 1.4 million for SSIP, the per household income would be 2.4 million. And if this is expanded to the entire nation, this will require a budget of 35 trillion. And if the 30 trillion is given out to basic, it will be $600,000 per person. So with the same budget, we can reduce the income polarization dramatically through SSIP. So we have NIT. So I am wondering why we are trying to apply BI when it costs so much. In particular, out of OECD countries, we have the highest elderly poverty rate. And my opinion, I think that applies to US, Germany, and Finland. Professor Kim, we can give you 30 more seconds. Thank you. I understand. So lastly, I would like to say that in Korea, SSIP and the basic income is still undergoing experiments. And when looking at experiments of various of these experiments, there are design biases. So if there is a treatment group and control group, even when there isn't change, they will say that there was a change because there could be subjective well-being answers saying that there is a change. Therefore, we need to utilize various administrative data to overcome the limitations of these experiments. So I think we need to go forward with a new system because NBLSS has lived its course.
Next, from Korea University, Professor Kim Wonsub. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kim Wonsub from Korea University. So, it is a great pleasure to take part in the Seoul International Forum on safety income. So, in all areas, Korea has been a follower of advanced countries. But if you look at today's forum, it shows us that we are no longer just a follower. If we just follow other countries, there is nothing to learn. So I think that today's forum shows us the feasibility and innovation of SSIP. But through this session today, we looked at the experiments of other countries. And if you look at the modern welfare state, it has made a lot of progress. But the welfare state provides job security, and it's based on stable family relations. But because of various issues, this stability is undermined. And so people are looking at new initiatives, new programs. And there was a lot of control and enforcement in the existing welfare systems in the past. But the new welfare systems that we're looking at don't look so much at controlling recipients, but by supplying unconditional cash incentives, they are increasing the freedom and autonomy of citizens. So I think that this SISIP or this experiment, if you look at all of the discussion so far, was based around norm. But with SSIP and a lot of the discussions that are taking place are looking about the feasibility. How can we actually implement these programs? So I think that is where we can find the meaning behind these initiatives. So we heard from Finland, Germany, US case studies. And all of these programs are not just trying to enforce the program or control the recipients. They're giving people freedom in terms of money and time so that they can enhance the quality of their life. And I think that is the goal of a lot of these experiments. So you can see that there's been a paradigm shift compared to the existing welfare programs. Despite this fact, when we compare these three countries, there are differences. If you look at Finland, in their case, they are more focused on those who are receiving unemployment benefits. So there's a lot of focus on employment, motivation, and incentive. And in the Stockton City case of the United States, they look at people with lower income. So they're looking at how to improve the social structure. And in German Berlin's experiment, I think it's a model that is closer to basic income model. So it's about unconditionally providing the income to people. So it's there's more universality to the program. So if you look at Germany's case studies, we don't have the results of the study, so we can't talk about it in detail. But if you look at the U.S. Stockton City model, in welfare discussion, I think a lot of people focus on the fact that people don't work after receiving these incentives, or they are demotivated to work, so it leads to more poverty. And I believe that the results of Stockton City tell us otherwise, so it is quite meaningful. If you look at the Stockton City, rather than relying on the welfare system, when they receive this basic income, it shows us that the recipients, their life, their work, their health all improves. So there is a lot that we can learn from. And SSIP, I think, has a lot to benchmark from the Stockton City case study. Also, if you look at the Stockton City case study, there are some similarities to SSIP. First, in terms of social assistance, that is the goal. Social assistance is the goal. So compared to the existing welfare system, there is not a lot of areas where there's a conflict with existing welfare systems. And if you look at Germany's case study, they're providing more universal basic income, but I think the Stockton City model and SSIP is more financially manageable in terms of procuring the resources. So once again, I would like to emphasize that our welfare system cannot just copy or follow other countries. We've moved beyond that stage. I think experiments like SSIP should be implemented. We have to be innovator. We have to be leader, not a follower. And I think in terms of welfare state model, we can also be a leading country. Thank you very much. So thank you. Next, Park Jung-min from Seoul National University. So guaranteeing a certain level of income to citizens, I think that is described with many words like safety income, basic income, but I will call this guaranteed income. So I like to focus on three main points. The first thing I would like to focus on is there are many different guaranteed income experiments taking place around the world. And if I can share with you, my thought is that I have high expectations, but I'm very cautious. If you look at the guaranteed, a lot of the experiments have a common factor that is guaranteed income, but in terms of the benefits, who it's targeting is different, and also the experiment method is also different. So the high expectation I have is that there are many different types of guaranteed income experiments taking place. So the outcome of guaranteed income, what sort of factors are effective in terms of guaranteed income, I believe will be proved through data, and I believe that this data will be quickly accumulated. In Korea, we don't have a lot of proof or evidence-based policies, so we're going to carry out this experiment and we'll be able to assess the policies that we implement. And as mentioned before, we have to look at the benefits provided and also research methods. So we have to be very cautious in generalizing the outcome of these studies. And the second thing I would like to mention is that we have to think about what is the objective of the guaranteed income and what it should be. And this discussion must continue on. Each program has a different goal. For Finland, they look at employment motivation or employment incentive. SSIP and the US, they look at income security, and SSIP also looks at helping recipients who are in the blind spot. All of this is very important, but not only this direct objective, but we also have to look at the long-term fundamental goal of these guaranteed income programs. So guaranteed income can enhance income security and also address welfare blind spots. But at the same time, it might help citizens to live a life that they believe is worthy, and it will give them more room and give them more liberty and freedom. So that, I believe, should be more reflected in the various guaranteed income programs. And the reason why I mentioned this is because if you have clear objectives in place, then it is easier to assess the performance of that program. And it is also closely connected to measuring the outcomes of that program. In Finland, it said that employment motivation is low and subjective well-being is high. That was the meaningful result that was derived. But I think that taking a more comprehensive view, we have to look at the impact on quality of life, including subjective well-being. So these are some of the indicators that we also need to look at moving forward. And the guaranteed income should not stop at being a new experiment. It should bring about disruptive innovation and change. And many scholars talk about the strength of guaranteed income, and one of those is that it helps to supplement the existing Social Security program in terms of means test. Those that sort of bring discrimination can be addressed as well. So whether you're for or against a guaranteed income, we should look at these factors. And as we implement guaranteed income program and expand the program, I think all of these things should be considered. So guaranteed income should not be just an experiment. We have to increase the impact. At the same time, we have to reduce duplicity or inefficiency, and we should try to make a more just and equitable program. So I hope the guaranteed income projects will become disruptive innovators, and I believe that the case studies we heard from the different countries have the potential to do that. So thank you very much. Mayor always joining us, and we have many prominent experts from abroad joining us, but it seems that we are running out of time. But so many people have joined us, so we will take one question from the floor because so many people have joined us.
If you have any questions. So we are actually past the scheduled time. We were not able to have a discussion with the participants. However, we were able to hear remarks from speakers who are who have carried out important experiments around the world, and also renowned discussants. And through this discussion, I'm sure that we can design a social security system that reduces blind spots and that can lead to a more sustainable system. There is one pressing question, so we will entertain one question from the floor. Hello. Hello, everyone. I am a social worker in Seoul, and I am Jong-Sang, and I work with many national basic livelihood security recipients. And I heard from them that they want to experience SSIP in other regions too. So is there a possibility in which the safety income project can be expanded to other cities nationwide? And is there a way to expedite this? And many NBLSS recipients have asked this question. Also, those who are receiving NBLSS in Seoul is 910,000, and the SSIP is 820,000. So there is a difference of 90,000. And for those who receive the NBLSS, the gap is filled by the Seoul government. But for those who are not receiving the NBLSS yet, but that will be receiving this in the future, can the city government fill in this gap? It's a very difficult question, so we will be hearing from our mayor. Thank you for the great question. So this SSIP started in Seoul, and so the question, the first one, was about whether this can be expanded to other cities and other regions. But that is a question that is beyond my scope. So we plan to carry this out 2 to 3 years, and after the first and second year of the project, we will have 8 regular interim reviews of the results of the experiment. And as we accumulate the results, after 2 to 3 intermediate results come out, we may be able to get a social consensus that this experiment requires more diverse experiments, and in that case, similar experiments can be carried out in other regions too, for us to get the most data and information as possible. And if the experts help us out, then it could be carried out in Busan, Daegu, and Gwangju, and other cities in Korea. And so that is a thought that came to mind. And more urgently, I hope that the central government takes this over for them to carry out a nationwide program, and then we can get more accurate data about the experiment. And there are many participants who are participating, and you have a lot of interest in this area. And through your active interest and participation, we may be able to see this day come forward sooner than later. And such experiments, if you agree that this helps in overcoming the limitations to our current welfare system, I hope that you can combine your opinions with us and join forces with us. Do you agree? Yes. And on the second question, yes, I recall that those issues were pointed out, and even before we started the SSIP, we identified those gaps, and that is why for those gaps that have been identified, the income gap is being filled in as we are implementing this project. And I think that the actual people who have designed the system, such as Professor Ki-sung Park and our welfare department head, knows about this better than I do. So they, I think, will be able to answer that question. I understand that that gap has been filled, though. Thank you.
So thank you very much. With this, we will conclude the panel discussion for session 1. Once again, thank you for your active interest and participation. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please give our moderator and panel discussants another big round of applause. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude session 1. Once again, we would like to thank the presenters, discussants, and moderators for their contribution. We are going to take a 10-minute break, and then we will resume the next part of our program. For those of us joining us on YouTube, if you could just keep your channel open, we will see you back here in 10 minutes.